Today on the Bureau podcast, we have a special breaking news episode on the revolt in Iran, and we're privileged to be joined by Nagar Mojtahedi. She is a Canadian investigative journalist with Iran International English and my former colleague at Global News. Her investigative work at Global raised urgent questions by exposing hundreds of Iranian regime actors that are very dangerous in our Canadian cities and diasporas, and more broadly to citizens across this country. And really, those are the same elements that are under pressure or being revolted against in Iran. So Nagar is probably among the best positioned in the world to tell the world what's happening in Iran and get us up to date. But first, Nagar, can you just briefly recount what you found in Canada? We'll circle back to it, through the conversation because I think it's really relevant.
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Sam, for having me. It's always a pleasure to see you, and the timing couldn't be more urgent. So, what we found through our investigation is that there's hundreds, potentially, if not thousands, of regime-linked officials living freely in Canada, and the big issue here is that many of these folks are kind of the middlemen, kind of the go-between, doing the money laundering, potentially in some cases surveillance on dissidents and those who are fighting against this regime, which is now under threat. And because they're not, necessarily IRGC officials or working in the government, they're able to enter the country and have these free lives and prepare. In many ways, they're preparing for this after day scenario that we're potentially seeing right now. Sometimes it's family members, sometimes it's middlemen, and sometimes it is former regime officials, right? Because I believe there was a cutoff date, and it was just around Bloody November, so November of 2019, where they banned all officials from entering Canada from that point on. But those from before were able and are still able to get into the country. So for example, about, I think it was 2 years ago, we had the former health minister who was a health minister during the same administration that was responsible for the downing of Flight 752, which, by the way, the anniversary was just yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
6 years since hundreds of Canadians, dual nationals, and those with strong ties and connections to Canada were killed when the Iranian regime shot down a Ukrainian passenger airline with two, not one, but two surface-to-air missiles. Now, this individual, he entered the country, and then he appeared in the background of a CBC News report in Quebec on tourism. And somebody spotted him in the Iranian diaspora and, zoomed in on his picture. And then, long and behold, here was this former health minister who was traveling around the country. He was in Montreal, then he went to Toronto, he checked out Casa Loma, then he was in Vancouver. And the reason he was able to come legally into this country is because he had quit the administration just before that cutoff date that they had.
Right. And to be clear, so not all of these people would be card-carrying Iranian guard officials. They could be
And that's what
family.
makes it so difficult, Sam. That's what makes it so difficult to suss out these individuals.
They could be family members. They could be very active organized crime members that
Yeah.
help facilitate money laundering for people like Ryan Wedding, or in another story, money laundering for cocaine going through Margarita Island and up into Halifax, as I've reported. But to be clear,
Yes.
before we jump into Iran, which is the real urgent focus here, for people in the Iranian diaspora, there have been people that have been threatened with death, perhaps have died through these Iranian state-sponsored networks in Canada and the Jewish
And
community,
Sue,
right?
look at and Jewish community, and look at Professor Erwin Kohler.
Mm-hmm.
He was up until recently under 24-hour RCMP protection. I mean, I recently saw him at I took part in a panel with him on transnational repression at the International Bar Association in Toronto, and he still did have Secret Service with him, protecting him.
Right. And my last point before jumping into on the ground in Iran is, I believe you told me formerly that Iranian community leaders in the United States were told not to travel to Canada because American law enforcement, who is on top of this threat, said that Canadian police and intelligence won't be able to protect you in Canada, or that you're very vulnerable. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. So that was what we heard from Masih Alinejad, who is an Iranian human rights activist, women's activist, dissident, journalist, and host as well. And anytime she comes to Canada, she needs to give at least 2 months advanced warning so that they can plan, essentially, because I mean, her life is in danger. It's a matter of life and death. So she can't just come on a plane and come to Toronto or Vancouver whenever she likes. And she was told by American law enforcement agencies that they don't have faith. They don't have faith in Canada, unfortunately, and that her safety would be at risk. And so that is very telling of just how dire the situation is in this
And
country.
that brings us to events in Iran. You can see why regime elements would want to target people like her in the United States and Canada, because she has been very active in the past 10 days or 10 or 12 days in telling the world what's happening in Iran, right?
Yes, and this is what they fear, and that's why, uh, as of I believe it was yesterday afternoon, our time, they cut off the internet completely, which is what they do when they want to ramp up repression and they don't want their voice to come out. And this is why it's so important to get things like Starlink into the country so that they're able to communicate with people like you and me.
Right. So we have seen the Iranian or the Persian people revolt against Islamists, Marxists, who's ever in power in Iran, the clerics right now. It's happened before. How did this time start, and what's different?
So this time it's interesting because it started about 12 days ago in the electronics and phone department of the bazaar. Now that's fascinating. Since when does a potentially a revolution start in the shopping department cell phone electronics place? But I guess it's modern times, right? And this place is very that sector of the economy is very susceptible and volatile towards foreign currency exchanges, right? And the volatility of the market. And as you know, there's in growing inflation. There is essentially an economic collapse. This is not just about inflation. This is the economic collapse of the Iranian economy. It's horrible. And so it started there because the prices were going up, the prices were going down. Generally, Bazaris benefit from that because they can make money this way. But in this case, they didn't even know how to set their prices and profit from this. And then it quickly grew into a big anti-regime movement because at the end of the day, what makes this different? It's not like 2009 where the slogan was "Where is my vote?" where there was a contested election between the reformist candidate Mir Hossein Mousavi and the hardliner Ahmadinejad, who was backed by the IRGC or Sepah. This wasn't 2022, 2023 of the Women Life Freedom Movement, where a lot of it was about, social dignity, social reforms. And it wasn't 2019 either. So, which was another major event in Iran, Bloody November. This was about everything. There is no particular, this is not about a VAT tax or anything like that. There's nothing specific here. This is the complete and overthrow of the regime because the regime is not able to provide the most basic services. Not only that, sometimes there are school closures and warnings because of the air. The air quality is so bad you can't breathe. Right? I mean, this is the most basic level, the air that you breathe, for God's sakes. There have been dry taps. There have been warnings that, Tehran is about to reach day zero because they're running out of water. And this is not just, of course, climate change is a factor here, but it's been years and years of mismanagement that has led to this point. It didn't have to be this way. And then they just use climate change as an excuse, although, it can exacerbate and make the situation worse. But I mean, from the air that you breathe to the water that you drink, to the economy, to your social rights, they can't provide anything. And the interesting thing about this, Sam, is that the Bazar class, the merchant class, was traditionally the pillars and the backbone of not just the Iranian Revolution, but thereafter supporters of the regime. And what we saw is, in Women Life Freedom, we saw this happening with the Gen Z, a lot of younger people, a lot of women. And yes, we're seeing that now too, as the protests continue to grow. But it started really not in the big cities, although they did have a presence there. But the thing that stood out was how this was happening in smaller cities, in religious cities, in the cities that they typically counted on, places like Qom, places like the holy city of Mashhad, in eastern Iran. So these are typically the people that you would associate with the regime, who are now turning against them. So they've completely lost all legitimacy in all sectors of the population. Not just Persians, but huge segments of the ethnic minorities as well, the Kurds, the Baluch, the Azerbaijanis. Iran is a very multi-ethnic country, and everyone is pretty much rising up against this regime.
Right. So walk us through the evolution from day one, day two to day five to where we are now in how this is built up and spread across the nation.
So as I said, it started off with the merchants, with the bazaars, and it just every day you would see more people. It started off last week as hundreds, and I was asking the question at that time, and I remember, just in the newsroom, like, is this it? And people were saying, it's too early to tell. We've seen protests happen in the past, and then they repress it, or you might not get media attention. But the interesting thing is here is the Trump factor, right? And this is where we started to really notice a shift in terms of the continuation and of the protest movement itself. When Trump put out that tweet that if the Iranian regime kills its people, we're locked and we're loaded. This gave a lot of, I believe, based on just anecdotally what we're seeing in videos and what we're hearing from Iran, gave them a lot of confidence. And I think it meant a lot to them, even if it's just rhetoric at this point. Because in 2009, under the Obama administration, Iranians had been asking for help from Obama. And at the time, Obama, he did condemn the repression and the violence and all that kind of stuff. But his line was pretty much, we're watching you, to the Iranian regime. The world is watching you. Whereas Trump, in very Trump fashion, is like, we'll kill you. So, there's a little bit of a difference, right? So that's when we started to really notice that it spread. It was getting bigger. And again, the movement it wasn't just merchants. It wasn't just people wanting, reform is dead in Iran, not just people taking off their hijab and this and that. It was people who do wear the hijab, like to wear the hijab, and want to wear the hijab, and are very more, as we say in Farsi, sonati, more traditional people, and happening in cities like the holy city of Mashhad. And ever since the call out, Prince Reza Pahlavi, the son of the exiled last Shah of Iran, put out a call for Thursday and again for tonight, for Friday evening at 8:00. Yes, we did notice that the size of the protests did grow here. Now, going back to President Donald Trump, if I were the Iranian regime, I would be scared, because Trump has shown through his past actions that, oftentimes when he says something, he does mean it. I mean, just take a look at the case of Iran, for example. In 2019, he did kill Qasem Soleimani, who was the architect of this kind of forward defense, sacred defense, ring of fire around Israel. And really, his whole strategy was to grow the proxy networks, right? Because he knew, he was a smart man. He understood that Iran is not a great military power. It's not a great force within the region. So he did what he thought Iranians, at least the proxy networks, could do best, which is to commit terror and to take the Americans out that way, which worked. We saw that in Iraq. The Americans left. We saw that, in the 80s in Lebanon, for example, through Hezbollah. So, that's one example. And then more recently, during the 12-day war, he did bomb Iran's nuclear sites and support Israel. So it's not just rhetoric. So at this point in time, Iranian protesters are being killed, at least 35. and two are dead, and 2,000 have been arrested. Unfortunately, the internet has been cut off, so now we don't have access to information to know what's happening right now. So I can't give you that updated version, but I can only imagine that it's getting worse. This is what the Iranian regime does when they want to carry out greater acts of repression, to cut off the entire society from sending out their voice, to sending out their message, to show what is happening in the country. And at this point, President Trump has not intervened. He was most recently, I believe, on Fox News or something, and I think he said something along he's being asked this, you said this, but it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite obvious. And I think he said something along the lines of, oh, well, all the, there was a stampede and people, he said something ridiculous like that,
Mm-hmm.
which is obviously not true. But I think it goes to show you that Trump is just trying to keep his options open here, right? And he is going to have to make a decision soon. You can't say something like that and then not do it. So him and potentially Israel through Netanyahu I would think are going to get involved in some form or fashion. And he has shown through his past actions, most recently in Venezuela, that he does prefer a more surgical, precise strikes, right? Where you don't have boots on the ground. We know that a lot of Trump supporters, and not just Trump supporters, but Americans in general, don't want to have boots on the ground. They have very bad memories of Iraq and of Afghanistan, and they don't want to risk American lives, which makes sense. And the whole notion of regime change is, when you say it, it's like Americans have this almost like a bad taste in their mouth, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to go there. And what we saw in Venezuela, not necessarily regime change, it's more leadership change. Like, he still did prefer the route of some sort of negotiated deal with the Venezuelan government. Information is coming out right now of just how penetrated that government was of American, CIA and officials. So the question is, what are the, eyes and ears of the Americans on the Iranian regime? I don't know, but we definitely do know, based on the 12-day war, that Israel has for sure infiltrated the Iranian government, or else they wouldn't have been able to do what they did and carry out the assassination attempts so successfully and easily, like they did in the 12-day war with top IRGC commanders and nuclear scientists. My friend Gisu Nia, who's an international human rights lawyer, she recently posted on X that more than half of the individuals who have committed crimes against humanity, who she was preparing for, this day after scenario, for victims to have their day in court and to have justice, were dead. She's like, most of the people who I documented evidence against to take them to court through international tribunals were taken out by Israel.
Right. So I want to focus, before getting back into the geopolitics and Obama Trump, which I think is huge. The latest images we saw, I believe, IRGC facilities under attack and being burned. We saw, many thousands on the street, people climbing lampposts and trying to knock surveillance cameras out. So
incredible.
Before the internet went out, and obviously the volume of images has leaked down to a minimum. What were we seeing last night in terms of actual Iranian regime assets under attack?
So that's interesting that you should mention that, because that is definitely one of the elements that people look out for, analysts look out for, when they determine whether something is a revolution or not. So was it happening at every IRGC facility? No, but the fact that it was happening at least one that I saw is still a pretty big deal, especially for Iranian people who are culturally very, very passive aggressive. They're not violent at all, and by and large, this protest hasn't been violent in terms of the protesters themselves. We did see, I believe, maybe one or two security officials with the regime who have been killed. Some protesters are armed, but again, that's a very rare sight. The majority of these protesters, overwhelmingly, like more than 90%, are not armed at all, which goes to show you the incredible courage and strength on their part, because they're really going out with nothing. And I'm hearing stories from my sources in Iran of people telling me, my little brother was out protesting yesterday, my grandmother. These are people who have never protested in their lives at all. Even the grandmother didn't protest in 1979 during the Islamic Revolution. So this is very telling when you see all sectors of society coming out. Now, one of the things that I did see, which was, left me teary eyed. I was crying. I got so emotional saying this, and I know other people did as well. Is in some of the smaller towns, we are seeing what we call Nirwe and Tizami, the police force, cheering on the protesters and waving and cheering them on, which is incredible. Now, of course, I should mention the police force is separate from the IRGC, but still their bosses like Mr. Radon and things like that are connected to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So this is significant. And in some cases, I have been seeing, you know, regime men and whatever you call it, and their security regime forces just walking away in some cases when protesters would go after them. So this is a case where we're seeing the protesters very emboldened and sometimes going after them, and they just walk away. Again, not in every case, but from that I have seen thus far, it's still pretty incredible.
Right. There's a conservative politician in the United Kingdom at a senior level, Tom Tugendhat, who's very plugged into intelligence networks of the West, and he's been a very active commenter. I get the sense from his commentary that he thinks this is real. There will be a regime change, and he posted within the last day or two. His comment was the Iranian Guard actors that you're talking about have been able to avail themselves of the benefits of organized crime and money laundering. They're the rich, they're the elites, and that's not true for the police forces and civil servants that are allowed to carry guns across much of Iran. And I think he was suggesting that if it gets to a tipping point, those people, the police forces that aren't allowed to participate in that global organized crime, could join the people. Is that something that is plausible?
From connected to the regime or trying to sell gold in the UAE. So he's seeing all the signals and all the signs there, right? And he's right. I mean, the Iranian regime just put out something where they were offering, I think, $7 more or something per month, which made the protests even grow stronger because it's incredibly insulting. But most of the wealth is really concentrated with the regime and with these IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps officials. So yes, when you're in the police force and other sectors of, public sectors of society, why would you give your life for a government that will do nothing for you? And more recently, I think a lot of them are opening their eyes. Like, look at what happened during the 12-day war. Essentially, Israel was able to take over their airspace. That was it. I think there was a funny story that came out that the foreign minister, needed permission or something just so he could leave Iran because he didn't know what would happen. So they were controlling the Iranian airspace, and that's a very big deal and makes Iran very vulnerable. Where was their Hezbollah? Where was their Hamas? Did any of them come out and help them? No. So what was the point of them investing over time, literally billions of dollars? And into their nuclear facilities that were heavily damaged and set them back by a number of years. What was the whole point of that? And I think a lot of people who may have supported the regime woke up to that reality that this proxy network that was really expanded through Qasem Soleimani and their nuclear plan or ambitions have done nothing for them but bring war to their doorstep.
Right. To make a comparison, in Venezuela, we've seen reports of these collectivo gangs, that's thugs on motorcycles with assault rifles, machine guns, driving around and trying to, in the wake of Maduro being extracted to New York, trying to tamp down the people so they can't even feel they could celebrate. Similarly, in Iran, again, Tom Tugendhat and others pointed to, I believe, video clips of non-Persian speaking Middle Eastern actors. Apparently you could hear them speaking Arabic, and Mr. Tugendhat and others said, look, the regime has hired its external thug networks, which you point to, so Hamas, Hezbollah gangsters. Is that something that is happening on the streets to counter these, what you say is mostly peaceful masses in the streets?
Yeah, so here at Iran International, reporting that more than 800 members of an Iran backed Iraqi militia force have already entered Iran. And I'm hearing from my sources that they are hearing Arabic on the streets, that they are seeing big buses that are taking people away. I most recently found out about an individual who is a housekeeper at someone's house, and that individual's child has been missing for the past 10 days. So their employer went looking for the son, and it turns out that he's been in prison this entire time with no notification to the family, and he still hasn't been heard from since.
So to speak about the geopolitics again and the Trump factor, or the threats of action. One, do you get the sense, not whether you know or not from intelligence or government sources, whether the United States and Israel would have plans in place like the 12-day war to essentially. There was amazing stories where regime figures were called and said, "Look, you have a day to leave, or else we're going to kill you." And so, do you think this type of operation could be targeted at the top of the regime right now?
I think not necessarily at this moment right now. When you see movement like this happening in Iran, I don't think it would be on the part of the U.S. or Israel wise to do that, because if there's missiles, of course there's going to be potentially collateral damage. We did see at least close to 1,000 Iranians who weren't connected to the regime at all, who did die during the 12-day war, right? It's hard to assess the numbers, right, in terms of who was with the regime, who wasn't, but still, there were innocent Iranians who were killed. So at this point, that might, in some ways, scare the protesters, because if there's missiles above them, even if it is targeted, there's still the potential something could happen, right? Or that I know somebody whose their mother's apartment was destroyed because they happened to live next door to somebody who was connected to a nuclear scientist or something along those lines, and they didn't even know, right? And they did get warning from Israel, and they did leave, but their home was still damaged. So if something like that were to happen now, we wouldn't be seeing, and I think it's just common sense, the type of large protests and demonstrations that we're seeing right now. So I think if I'm Israel, if I'm the US, I want to see how this plays out. How much can the Iranians do organically on the ground themselves? And then I would see, but definitely there is going to be war, 100%. I'm not saying there isn't going to be. I mean, Israel and Iran they are at war with each other. There's just been a pause. It's not like the war ended. The ceasefire didn't put an end to hostilities between these two so-called enemies in the region, at least in terms of their governments and not necessarily the people. So we're definitely going to see a continuation of that. Is it going to happen, in a few days or next week? I don't think so. But as I said, Trump and Israel are going to have to get involved if the killings continue this way. And if the killings continue this way, you're going to see less protesters out in the streets anyways, right? People are going to be scared. They're going to retreat to their home. And maybe that's when Israel and the U.S. come in. But 100%, yes, we are going to see some sort of, again, seems that Trump is favoring these limited, precise, more surgical operations along with Israel. And we will see I believe, the pillars, the apparatus of the regime, those who are carrying out the repression and the violence will be hit. And I think they'll be hit hard. And listen, this is another thing that a lot of analysts are saying right now. Khamenei is not off the table. The supreme leader, taking him out and killing him now is truly not off the table. This is actually within the realm of possibility that he may be killed in one of these strikes, and that they would target him finally.
And what is his most recent position publicly? What has he said?
Same old, same old.
Yeah.
Same old that he's been saying, for the past 47 years. America and Israel are the devil, and this is, been infiltrated, whatever, by the Mossad, and his, typical lines coming from him.
Right. And speaking of 47 years, there's an iconic image that's been circulating online of, it looks like a grandmother bleeding from the mouth And I think she said, I haven't been alive for 47 years. I'm not afraid, something to that effect.
I can't stop thinking about that video and that image. She was completely, her face wounded, bloodied, and she said, I am not scared. I am not scared. I've been dead for the past 47 years. What does that tell you? It means that life for the past 47 years has been like nothing, you know? That's truly what it means for them, is that these past 47 years have been hell for many people. And this is a woman, given her age, she would have known, obviously, what was her life like before, right? So she would have seen, I mean, I know a lot of younger Iranians have nostalgia for the pre-Islamic revolutionary Iran, but they don't know. That's just a nostalgia that they see when they watch, you know, YouTube clips, or their parents or their grandparents talk about it. But this is obviously someone, given her age, who lived through it. And imagine the kind of such a substantial change from one extreme to another.
Right. Before we talk about where to from here, do you, now that the internet has gone black, do you still have access to your sources in Iran, and how are you gathering your information?
At this point, we don't. There are people who have Starlink and things like that that we are able to access. There are Telegram channels, but what I mean by we don't is the extent and the depth that we had before. Obviously, it's not the same, but there are still some people, like I said, and this costs a lot of money. It's a few $1,000s that people who could afford it. Starlink was smuggled in to Iran. We are still able to have some level of access, and they come in through Telegram channels, through Instagram, through WhatsApp, and there are something called like filter chican that they have in Iran that they're able to bypass these restrictions. But by and large, it's not what it was, you know, just yesterday or the day before as well, in terms of gathering information on the ground. But there are, you know, networks inside Iran. There are human rights organizations, and they work with human rights organizations here in the West, and they do still communicate with each other.
Right. Turning to a little bit of the reaction in North America, Canada, and United States, and both of us worked for mainstream media companies. There's been some criticism over the past, you know, week that the BBC and CBC seem to be nowhere on this story. Can you share your thoughts on that?
Can I share this with you? Let me find it. So I'm just going on. I'm going to go on Facebook because I know he just posted it, and I just want to quote exactly. I won't give his name, obviously, but what he said about recent coverage that came out from the CBC. And where is it? He wrote, CBC has woken up to put together the most terrible reporting on the events unfolding in Iran. As an avid listener of programs such as Front Burner, blah, 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 with this, I'm utterly disappointed and in shock of this terrible coverage of the news on CBC News tonight. Please do your due diligence and at least talk to Iranians before putting such a disappointing reportage. With all the critiques that I have of Radio Canada coverage, they have a way better understanding of the grass, blah, blah, blah. So anywho, Iranians are writing to the CBC, for example. I haven't seen much on any Canadian media, really. You know, it's interesting. In the first like day or two of the protests, I did see coverage in general, especially in the US. And I was quite surprised. And I was like, oh, they never really pick up on protests in the, you know, day one or day two. And I think it was because of Trump's tweet that they reacted to it then, which makes sense from an American perspective. But since then, and, you know, CBC, you know, Tom Tugendhat was on my podcast criticizing CBC coverage. And the one thing that they did focus on at the beginning, I think, was, oh, is this, you know, has this been tampered with AI? And it's like, oh, great. Thanks, guys. Like, the second you do talk about the protest, now you're disputing whether something is real or not. Obviously, this is real. It is happening. Are there going to be some videos that are tampered with AI? Of course. Like, I mean, we live in the age of AI, and things can be manipulated. But by and large, no, the videos are real. We don't need to do a whole in-depth investigation and report on that. How about just focus on the videos you do know are real, which is most of them, and report on that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe since we both, again, we have worked for big Anglo mainstream media companies, and what do you think it is? Like, first of all, my comment is, when I see people, for example, you know, let's just say far leftists, marching through Jewish neighborhoods, along with, I believe backed by Iranian regime elements. You talked about Erwin Kotler, former justice minister, under
He's Jewish, exactly.
Jewish, under death threats, again from the Iranian regime, I believe, and organized crime in Canada. So my sense is that people in North America that don't get this, they don't understand that the drugs that are flowing into North America, including cocaine and fentanyl, the money laundering, the marching through our streets, threatening citizens, terrorism, is emerging.
University campus protests. Yeah.
Yeah, it's emerging from the Iranian regime. So that's my comment. And yet CBC is doing nothing. I think the lady that reported on it before, there was some criticism that she was wearing a Palestine style scarf or something in some of her Middle Eastern reporting. I don't want to get off topic, but what's your thought on why the BBC, CBC, and other big companies don't get what's happening in Iran?
Is it that it doesn't fit their narrative of what the Middle East should be? Is it because they're posting signs with the name of, so they've been changing, and you'll see this in the videos, they've been changing some of the street signs in Iran to Trump's name, which I think is pretty smart, because whether you like Trump or you don't like Trump, the way to get to him, and I think it's pretty obvious right now, is through compliments and flattery. So if you want to get something out of him, that's all you need to do. I mean, you've cracked the code. Just erect some sort of statue with Trump, and you'll get what you want. So I think the Iranians figured that part out, which is pretty incredible. And I think he will respond to that. Elon Musk put out a tweet in response to Khamenei. Khamenei put something like, the enemies of the state, and he was referring to the Iranian people, and Elon Musk said something along the lines of, he wrote in Farsi actually, and if I translated it was like in your dreams or wishful thinking, something like that. And then the Iranian protesters took that. They're very smart. And then they used that line in their protests because they were trying to, again, make an appeal and to send a message to Elon Musk. And his help is needed right now, especially with something like Starlink. So, I don't have the answer. I don't know if it's because we don't, as Iranians, again, fit the certain narrative in the Middle East. I don't know. I really don't know what it is, because when you see tens of thousands of people out in the streets wanting freedom, why would you not cover that? I don't have the answer. And Tugendhat was talking about that with me too. And he mentioned like a laundry list of reasons why people in the West should care about what's happening in Iran. Listen, anytime there's a major event like this happening, you're going to see a flood of migration and immigration into countries, Western European countries, into North Canada and the US. That affects people. Iran is a great exporter of energy. When you put sanctions and limitations on the country, what's going to happen? You're going to bring the price up, and it's going to be affecting, bill payments in the Western world. I mean, so safety, like you mentioned, their connections to organized crime. We have a case where, according to the FBI, the Iranian regime was trying to take out a dissident in Maryland. And who did they hire? They hired one Hells Angels from Canada and another one who was an associate of the Hells Angels, right? So it affects your safety. It affects, your real estate prices when they're infiltrating your country. It affects crime and the production of fentanyl and distribution of drugs like fentanyl, et cetera, et cetera. So it should matter to people. And the outcome is going to make a difference in the world. A lot of the source of issues around the world comes from the Iranian regime. So I think a free Iran is very beneficial. And again, I don't know what's going to happen in terms of the outcome, but people should be paying attention. And why they're not, I don't know. My answer would be because we don't fit maybe the narrative that they imagine.
Yeah, and to flesh out, your point about the Hells Angels in Vancouver and that plot, a police expert that we both know and talk to, I was talking to that person off the record, and he said, look, that Hells Angel in Vancouver, one day they're sending fentanyl down to Washington State. Another day they're laundering money up through, working with the Falkland Lab, which absolutely, that's part of the Falkland Lab case, that guy. And the next day, like you said, his biker colleague in the States.
Damian Ryan, right? Yeah, Damian Ryan, I think.
Yeah, Damian Ryan is the bad guy, the Hells Angel in Vancouver, who was hired by Iranian intelligence through an Iranian drug trafficker. And his buddy sent him a text message saying, we need to take the torso or the head off that target, right? So the next day, while you're doing fentanyl one day, another day you're going to make a few $100,000 to decapitate an American citizen who's Iranian, right? So,
Yeah. And what does that tell you, Sam? It tells you that ideology doesn't matter here. I don't think Damian Ryan is, into
he's not
Khamenei and the Islamic Republic of Iran. You can just buy people. It goes to show you it's very easy. Just buy them.
a few 100,000 to kill someone and take their head off.
Yeah,
That's the
that's all it
price.
takes. Even less. Even less.
Right. So, well, but neither of us has a crystal ball. I think both of us have a good grip on watching how events develop and getting a sense of what's going to happen. So, you better than me. What's going to happen in the next week in Iran if you had to, take the forecast?
So this is not sustainable. This is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for the government and it's not sustainable for the people. So at one point, something's got to give. And I don't think, and listen, when we look at past protests, this is not the same Islamic Republic. This is not since, post October 7th, right? It's just a different world that we're living in. Their proxy networks have been severely weakened, so they can't rely on them that much, other than, like you said, carrying out repression, right? But in terms of the larger, grander business here, they can't do much. Syria is gone. They lost the greatest Arab ally in the region, Bashar al-Assad. Venezuela now, that's huge source of income for them that they were, money laundering, drug trafficking between Hezbollah and Venezuela. Also, they were, producing arms and things like that. So that's another huge loss for them. And geopolitically, the world is different, right? You have Trump. As I said, the difference between Obama and Trump, we're watching you to, I'm just going to kill you. You don't know with President Trump what you're going to get. And I think that wild card element must create a lot of anxiety for Iranian regime officials, because you don't know. I think with Biden, you kind of knew what you were going to get. With past presidents, they had a line and they stuck with it. But with Trump, he could go from one extreme to another extreme overnight, right? And I think that that's probably very scary for them in the regime. And you have a society where, and you had the 12-day war. Sorry, I should mention the 12-day war. That was very significant. That did a lot to take away this so-called fear factor, because there was always talk in the DC circle, oh, well, if you do this to the Iranian regime, they're going to unleash, all their wrath on the world, and it's going to make things worse. They're going to race for the bomb. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. So they wouldn't take those steps because of that factor of, what if this happens and we just make the situation worse? So that element of fear, and that translated on the ground politically to people as well. And then don't forget women, life, freedom. How many hundreds of Iranians, innocent Iranians, died for their freedoms. But it did, although it didn't overthrow the regime, it did make some societal reforms and changes, which translates to political change eventually. So the women, life, freedom movement also made a difference in terms of, mobilizing people and having an impact on the regime. So it's not the same Iran that it was, during the years of the JCPOA, where they were having, again, like foreign investment and money coming in as well. And then you couple that with the climate disaster, like there's a ecological collapse in Iran, the economic collapse in Iran. Everything is just crumbling. Everything is collapsing. This regime is rotting. How long it will take, I don't know. If it's going to take a few days or a few weeks or maybe a year or two, and they're stuck in this circle of like a failed state, scenario. But this regime, I think it's done in the sense of, I believe the Islamic factor of this regime is done. I believe the mullahs are done. I do predict potentially seeing Trump do what he did in Venezuela, where he may make a deal with somebody in the military or the IRGC, something like that, to have some sort of coup d'etat and get rid of the mullahs, get rid of this whole, chance of death to America, death to Israel, Magbat America, Magbat Israel, get rid of that. Then potentially he could then open up the sanctions, right? lift the sanctions like he did with the Caesar Act in Syria. That would make a huge difference for the people of Iran. Again, if you get rid of this Islamatization of the country and this notion of velayat faqih with this, head cleric at the top, and have something of like a military junta scenario, I could definitely see that. Some people are saying maybe the crown prince could return to Iran. We are hearing chants in Iran of Javid Shah and God rest the soul of Reza Shah, his father, and Pahlavi Barmigarde, the Pahlavi is returning. So that could also be a potential scenario as well. Next week, he is taking part in an event. I believe he was invited by some sort of Jewish association to attend in Mar-a-Lago. Who else is in Mar-a-Lago? President Donald Trump. Now, President Donald Trump was recently on Fox News. They asked him about the crown prince, and I think he said something along the lines of, he's a nice guy, but that's for the people of Iran to decide. I'm not going to get involved in that. And that may be the case. Maybe yes, or maybe they meet in Mar-a-Lago and something else happens. He definitely does have the support of Israel. You could see him a couple of months ago meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. That's another potential scenario. But no matter how it all plays out, this regime in terms of the Islamic Republic is gone. Now, do we end up with a military junta? Do we end up with a constitutional monarchy? That part, I don't know, but I don't think that those who are already at the top with this regime would want to sacrifice themselves when they know there's no way out. What's their way out right now? Repression? How much longer can you continue with repression? At one point, people are going to be like that woman that you mentioned, the woman in her 60s or 70s chanting, for the past 47 years, I've been dead. So when you say for the past 47 years, I've been dead, it means you have nothing to lose. And when people have nothing to lose and they feel like they're already at the end anyways, that creates, a lot of courage for people, right? And again, like I told you, people saying that their grandmothers, their little brothers are out protesting, seeing, things that we haven't seen in the past before. People are fed up. They're done. I should also mention, with that military junta situation, we should also see what the Iranian people accept too, right? Because again, it's not just about that one man at the top. It's an entire system, right? This Islamic Republic system. And they may say, you know what, reform is dead. We don't want this. But again, if they say, we're going to get rid of the Islamic factor, no more mullahs, something along the lines of, I don't know, a Pakistan or maybe a Indonesia, I don't know. But it depends what the Iranian people accept as well. That will determine the outcome because they're fed up. They're fed up. Again, economic collapse, ecological collapse, political collapse, everything from the air that you breathe to the water that you drink, and not being able to. I'm hearing from people who are very wealthy in Iran that it's expensive for them too.
Mm-hmm. What's the response in Vancouver, Toronto, and the diaspora community in Canada?
The response has been, this regime needs to go. It's been that way for the past 47 years, and people right now are just very emotional. People are glued to their phones, to social media. I mean, we're getting less videos coming in right now, but to the news, to Iran International, people are just glued to it, and it's all we talk about. And it's, just the other day, I was just thinking about all the people who sacrificed their lives since 1979 because of this regime. I think about all the people who have died, who may not have taken part in protests, who may not have sacrificed themselves, but people who have died along the way who would have loved to have seen this day happen, right? I think about all the victims of Flight 752. I think about the people who have, the Iranian regime has, according to the United Nations, fact-finding mission, intentionally targeted the eyes of protesters during the Women Life Freedom Movement. I think about all the girls that I met who are now in the West who escaped Iran, who have been blinded in one eye, who can't see. It just makes me so emotional. I've been crying a lot. I've been crying a lot because finally this feels real. Finally, this is our time. This is it. This is it no matter what. Like, as I said, I don't know what the outcome is. I don't know what it is, but I know they are gone. That's how much I know. And it's been really, really emotional for all of us. And right now, a lot of people with family members in Iran are very, it's a mixture of joy and excitement, but also fear because they're worried. Okay, now that they're cracking down, now that I don't have access to my family, what's going to happen to them? Is there going to be a bloodbath? When is Trump and Netanyahu? When are they going to intervene? And what can the Iranian people do who are not armed, as I said, and peaceful protesters do to stop this? I don't know, but we're all, it's a lot of emotions. It's been a roller coaster, but this is basically what people have been waiting 47 years for, and it's finally happening. And it's both beautiful and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah. Let's end by asking, what do you think your next month of reporting is going to look like? Who are you going to
Oh
be?
God, I don't know.
Well, who do you most want to talk to? And with the internet out, I mean, how do you think you'll proceed for the next few weeks?
Oh my gosh, I don't know, from honestly from hour to hour.
Hmm.
Like for example, when I did my podcast record yesterday, I just got it out right away. Usually I wait till Friday morning, but I'm like, this could change
Yeah, yeah.
in the next few minutes. Um, I simply I really don't know what it's going to be like. I keep getting messages of people saying, "Hey, when are you going to fly into Tehran?" And I hope so. I hope that will be the next mission for me as a journalist, and for you, that we can meet each other in Iran and report from there. Um, but it's really really hard to say at this point. We're really watching out for, as you said, Trump, the United States, and Israel, to see what their next moves are going to be and
Hmm.
how they're going to intervene now that they don't have the internet. And I ask myself, is Khamenei maybe testing Trump? Is he testing to see if he's bluffing? Right. So I think the next 48 hours are going to determine a lot of how we do our coverage and what will unfold in the coming days and weeks to come.
All right. And the last point or question is, I mean, we've talked about the BBC being nowhere, CBC being nowhere, most of the world's media being nowhere. On the other hand, I saw J.K. Rowling.
Yes, yeah.
I've seen a lot of
John
British.
Cleese.
Yes, I've seen a lot of British people saying we're with the people of Iran. So what does that mean to the community? And what would the community like to see from the rest of the world that hopefully gets how momentous this could be?
It means we deeply appreciate it. It means so much when we see people like that who are not necessarily directly connected to Iran, or maybe they have an Iranian friend, I don't know, but I'm sure they do because there's lots of Iranians in the UK. But it really, it gives encouragement, and most of all, it gives encouragement and it emboldens the protesters in Iran itself, because they see this and they're very much connected to the outside world. Well, I mean, minus the fact that there's no internet right now, but generally speaking, I mean, they are very connected to those types of individuals. And when you see high profile people coming out and being your voice, it means everything. And I hope that we see more of this. And again, I don't know why we haven't up until this point.
Well, it's Friday, January 9th. You're up early in Vancouver, so thanks for that. I'm in Ottawa. We're gonna get this online right away to fill that media gap. And
Yeah, and thank you to you, Sam, for your advocacy as a journalist and for your continued coverage on the Iranian regime and their threats, not just in Canada but around the world. So I do appreciate you and what you do.
thank you. Yeah, again, this is even if you for some reason don't care about what's happening in Iran, I'm telling the people of the world, the Iranian regime cares about you, and it's dealing drugs. It's it's focusing on you. So that's why you should care. Like the old saying goes, you may not care about war, but war cares about you.
Oh, can I say one thing before
Yeah.
I forget? Because you just reminded me of something. So yesterday, when we were monitoring Iranian state TV, do you know what they were showing?
Tucker Carlson.
Yes,
Yeah,
they were.
it's just such a commentary on what's going on. We're talking about the BBC being nowhere. Well, on the other hand, we've got some major Western influencers probably paid, whether they know it or not, by Qatar or the Muslim Brotherhood, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
So
no,
there you go. I just wanted to point
well,
that out. So while
well,
this is all
we're
happening with the Western world, we've got a major Western influencer, right, on Iranian state TV. While protests are happening, instead of reporting on that, they're showing him. So that tells you a lot, right?
So before I let you get on with your day, you're the expert. What does that mean to see a Tucker Carlson broadcasted by the Iranian regime? You know,
It
what's
means that
going
he's
on there?
repeating their. It means that he's repeating their narrative and their propaganda. And so I saw a segment that he did with Anna. I can't remember her name. Is it Kaplan or something? Is that
That
her name? I don't know.
rings,
From the Young Turks.
rings a bell. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. From the anyways, they were talking about Christians in Iran and how everything's so perfect and look at this church, look at that, and it just completely missing all the nuances. Yes, there are beautiful churches in Iran. Yes, we do have an incredible Iranian Armenian population. Yes, we do have Christians. Are people being rounded up and taken to prison every day for being Christian? No. Do they have normal lives? Pretty much, yes. But are Iranians who convert to Christianity are under threat? Do they get executed for that? Yes, they do. I personally know someone who's an Iranian of Assyrian origin, like Patrick Beth David. And when she was a little girl, her father went missing. Her father was a pastor. And then she went walking in the forest up in northern Iran, where she's from, and she found him hanged to death.
Yeah.
So
I
their
mean,
lives are at risk.
and we keep saying this will be the last comment, but Tucker Carlson, you mentioned, yeah, people like him are getting a curated view of the nation that the regime wants. It reminds me so much of Pierre Trudeau traipsing off to China as a student in the 60s and getting a curated tour of how they are treating their minorities so well. Exactly
Their
what,
reality. Their
right?
reality. And you don't forget that interview he did with Pezeshkian, the president of Iran. That was ridiculous. Can you ask one tough... I'm not opposed to him doing an interview with Pezeshkian. If Pezeshkian wanted to do an interview with me, I'd do it. Why not? We're journalists. We talk to everybody. We talk to everybody from every, walk of life. We're not going to restrict ourselves, but you should ask real questions.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, this is the last. Where can people find your podcast, where you're reporting, and find you online in the crucial next couple of weeks, especially?
Yeah, so they can head to if you go on YouTube and type in "I for Iran," it's under Iran International, and that's "I for Iran," EYE, like your eye, anyways. And it's also via audio on Spotify, on Apple, Amazon, all your major podcast platforms. And you can also head to iranintl.com/en. This is our English website, and we have a live blog. We're constantly updating. We're staffed 24 hours, so we've got so much on the website for you to check out and stay informed.